What if Naruto was the Eternal Sage Part 3? If you enjoy this, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Disclaimer, I don't own this what if. The people who were present at the entrance to the academy that morning were able to witness Naruto materialize already in a smooth walk, in front of the academy. Some of them actually allowed themselves to acknowledge how cool he looked, arriving in such a fashion. Casually making his way inside the academy, Naruto ignored the muted whispers from his peers and the others standing around the school's entrance. No doubt news of his performance during the graduation exams had already spread. Naruto arrived at his assigned classroom and entered to find that he was the first one there. Shrugging to himself, he proceeded to the single seat at the back, having no intention of ending up seating next to Sasuke and thus suffering the horrendous voices of his fan club. Deciding to kill some time, he took out the tale of the gutsy ninja and began to read it, again. His sharp senses detected the approach of a few classmates, and thus he didn't even twitch when the door opened to accept 4 people into the room. The sounds of dragging feet and chewing preceded Shikamaru and Choji, while the muted sound of buzzing heralded the entrance of Shino. The last student was from a civilian family and, from what Naruto had observed, would probably end up being cannon fodder down the line. Shikamaru, Choji, and Shino took the seats in front of Naruto, who hadn't looked up from his books since their entrance. Shikamaru threw a quick and considering glance at Naruto, then just shook his head and mumbled, "Troublesome." Shino, on the other hand, actually turned and addressed Naruto, "Congratulations on your success in the graduation exams, Uzumaki-san." Naruto finally looked up at that and giving an eye smile to Shino, he replied, "Thank you, Aborame-san. As I recall, you also did quite well, so congratulations to you too, and please feel free to call me Naruto." "Thank you, and the same to you too." Both of them returned to their previous positions, Naruto reading his book and Shino seating calmly. By this time Shikamaru had already dozed off, while Choji just continued munching on his chips. Over the next few minutes, the class slowly filled up with the successful academy graduates. When Sasuke entered, he cast a briefly assessing gaze at Naruto before taking his seat in the middle of the room. Naruto's sensitive hearing easily picked up the approaching footsteps of 2 students, and judging by their voices, he correctly deduced their identities. A few seconds later, Haruno, Sakura and Yamanaka Ino burst into the room, obviously having just finished sprinting to the academy, then began their customary arguments and competition for the seat next to the Uchiha. Ruka came in before they could settle their argument and cowed them into submission. Naruto glanced up as Ruka came in and smiled as he noticed the absence of Mizuki. The fool was most probably enjoying the hospitality of the TI department at the moment. He returned to his book, only peripherally aware of the various team assignments being read out by Ruka. Seeing as he wasn't the deadless this time around, he absently wondered whose team he would be. Broken bar and Uzumaki. Naruto. Your Jounin sensei is Hatake Kakashi. Broken bar. Well then, that answered that. He wondered what convinced the old man to place him on the same team as the top 2 students in his year, until he remembered that as far as the Hokage was concerned, Naruto had attempted suicide a few years ago. Well, that would do it, he mused to himself. After banishing his thoughts, and noticing Ruka's closing statements and subsequent dismissal for lunch, he returned to his reading. Hours later, only the 3 future members of Team 7 were still seated inside the classroom, waiting for their Jounin sensei. Sakura had spent the past 2 hours trying, and subsequently failing, to get Sasuke to go on a date with her. After a particularly vehement denial, she decided to take a little breather, much to the Sasuke's well-hidden relief. She turned her attention to the 3rd member of her team and was surprised to note that he hadn't moved from the spot where he had been reading for the past few hours. Now that she was paying attention to him, she allowed herself to take him in fully. She recalled the time when he used to constantly follow her around, asking her for dates and making her feel so good about herself. No matter how annoyed she had felt at the time, The constant attention and adoration had bolstered her sometimes flagging self-confidence. However, ever since he had missed school for about 2 months, things had changed. At first, when she noticed that he seemed to be ignoring her, she brushed it off, fully expecting him to get back to pestering her. It never happened. It took some time, but she eventually came to realize that Naruto simply didn't care about her anymore. It was a surprisingly bitter pill to swallow, but swallow it, she did. She cast a glance at Sasuke, and seeing the closed-off expression on his face, she decided to sit quietly by herself, until their sensei arrived. Sasuke breathed an internal sigh of relief when Sakura finally ceased bothering him. He noticed the glance she threw at the corner and turned to see Naruto sitting there, reading his book. He was almost startled to notice that he had forgotten that there were 3 people waiting in the classroom. Now that he had noticed his last teammate, he remembered his desire to find out more about him. Never one to beat around the bush, he addressed him directly. "Hey, Dada Broken Bar Uzumaki, how did you do so well on the exams if you missed so many important classes?" Sakura perked up at the question and turned back to Naruto, as she too was curious about his previously unknown skill. Without taking his eyes off his book, Naruto distractedly replied, "Did you ever consider that I chose not to attend those classes because I didn't need them?" Sasuke blinked at Naruto's response. He concluded that Naruto must have meant that he got training outside the academy, thus negating any need to attend the practical academy classes. Still curious, he continued his inquiry, "And who did you get help from?" At that, Naruto finally glanced up from his book, and fixing Sasuke with a disinterested look, he retorted, "Help? Why would I need an instructor when I am fully capable of reading?" Sasuke found it hard to believe that Naruto had learned all that from scrolls, but before he could continue his questioning, the door was thrown open. He turned in surprise, noticing from the corner of his eye that Naruto was obviously not startled. In the doorway stood a tall gray-haired ninja wearing a face mask very similar to Naruto's. He even had a book in hand. The ninja, obviously their Jounin sensei, ran a bored gaze across the room and spoke in a lazy tone, "My first impression of you is that you're boring. Meet me on the roof in 5 minutes." In a cloud of smoke, he was gone. Sasuke glanced at Sakura, then glanced at the empty seat where Naruto used to be. His eyes widened when he realized that Naruto had somehow vanished from the room without his notice. Huffing out a frustrated breath, he left the room, making his way towards the roof. Hatake Kakashi suddenly felt eyes on him and casually glanced up from his book. He had to fight down a twitch when he noticed his blonde-haired student calmly staring at him. "When the hell did he get here, and how didn't I notice?" He saw the amusement in Naruto's eyes and narrowed his eye at him. In response to this, Naruto in turn fixed Kakashi with a narrow-eyed gaze. Sasuke and Sakura arrived on the roof to find their teacher and teammate engaged in a staring contest. As the 2 kids drew near, Sakura cleared her throat. In an eerily synchronized motion, Naruto and Kakashi turned to face the 2 of them and I smiled in unison. Fighting off creepy shudders, they took a seat on either side of Naruto and all 3 turned to face Kakashi. Deciding to get the ball rolling, Kakashi began, "Well then, why don't we get started with introductions? I'll go first. My name is Hatake Kakashi, my likes are not your concern, nor are my dislikes. My hobbies and dreams a broken bar. Well, you're much too young to know those," Kakashi concluded with another wry smile. Motioning towards Sakura, he indicated for her to go next. She started. "My name is Haruno Sakura, my likes area broken bar." Glances at Sasuke with giggles and stifled squealing. "A broken bar. My hobbies area broken bar. Rinse and repeat. A broken bar. I dislike no pig, and my dream for the future is to a broken bar." Glance, ear piercing squeal. Sasuke and Kakashi shook their heads to clear the residual ringing, only to notice Naruto removing earplugs from his ears with laughter in his eyes. Almost sulking at the betrayal, Kakashi indicated that Sasuke was next. Sasuke began in a solemn tone, "Akayo Sasuke, a broken bar. I don't have many likes nor dislikes, And my hobby is training to get stronger. My dream for the future is a broken barno. My ambition is to revive my clan and kill a certain man. At the end of his speech, Sakura was gazing adoringly at him while Kakashi was giving him a thoughtful look that expertly hid the frown he wanted to show. Naruto was a broken bar reading his book. After getting over his surprise at just how indifferent his blonde-haired student could be, he motioned for Naruto to go next. As Naruto prepared to begin, he was completely aware of the blatant interest on Sakura's face, as well as the hidden interest on Kakashi's and Sasuke's faces. You may call me Uzumaki Naruto. I like the colors red and black. I dislike the color purple. My hobby is music, particularly playing the violin. Kakashi perked up at that surprising tidbit, as did Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto paid no attention to their reactions, however. He instead fixed all three with a suddenly fierce and determined gaze that caused all of them to subconsciously straighten and pay attention. My dream for the future is a broken bar. No, the reality of my future is a broken bar. I will become the greatest shinobi this world has ever known. The rooftop was silent for a few moments after Naruto's declaration, which sounded like a foretelling. Kakashi finally broke the silence after observing his sensei-son for a few moments and decided to wrap things up. Very well then, meet me on Training Ground 7 tomorrow at 6 a.m. for a survival test that will determine whether or not you become my genin or return to the academy for remedial training. Oh, and I suggest you don't eat any breakfast, you'll only throw it up. See you. In a cloud of smoke, he was gone before any of them could respond to his statement. Sasuke narrowed his eyes, determined to pass whatever test came his way the next day. He glanced to his side, only to discover that Naruto had once again vanished without him knowing. Gritting his teeth, he immediately shot down Sakura's offer of a date and departed for some training and preparation. Sakura, completely crushed by Sasuke's rejection and feeling anxious for her test tomorrow, also left the rooftop. The sound of incoming footsteps forced Sakura out of her daytime fantasy of being Sasuke's wife. Looking up, she was just in time to witness the figure of her blonde-haired teammate enter the clearing a whole 3 hours after they were told to arrive. She inhaled, preparing to lambaste her tardy team member when she was cut off by a casual statement from her intended target, so his 3-hour lateness is a regular thing. Good to know. Stunned, and feeling especially foolish for arriving so early, she quieted down and turned away from him, thus missing the amusement shining in his azure eyes. Sasuke merely grunted, refusing to acknowledge that he should have thought of the same thing. Naruto simply walked across the clearing to a tree on the other side, sat down, took out his book and began to read. He was fully aware of the contemplative looks being thrown his way by the other 2 members of his future team. Completely ignoring said looks, he prevented any amusement from showing on his face when he heard the near silent huff of frustration from Sasuke. Just as Sasuke was about to resume his interrogation from the day before, their late sensei showed up in a puff of smoke. Kakashi merely smiled as Sakura screeched her indignation to the high heavens, causing Sasuke to twitch. When her voice had ceased echoing, he calmly took out his earplugs and tossed a thumbs up at Naruto, who was failing to muffle his chuckles. Before Sakura could react to that insult, Kakashi's countenance became serious, prompting the 3 before him to pay attention. He raised 2 silver bells in one hand and began his instructions. The objective of this survival test is to acquire at least one of the bells you see in my hand. You will have until noon to accomplish this task. Anyone who fails to get a bell will be tied to one of the stumps in the clearing and will be denied lunch. Furthermore, the one who didn't get a bell will fail this test and will subsequently be sent back to the academy for another year. Now, begin. His instructions left no room for argument and his prospective students vanished into hiding in the surrounding vegetation. Kakashi spared a second to evaluate their stealth. Sasuke is well hidden, certainly undetectable to anyone Chunin and below. Sakura, on the other hand, isn't too bad, but nothing like a top kunoichi should be. And Naruto, a broken bar, is still standing in front of me. Giving his final student a vaguely perplexed look, he said, "You are not one, shouldn't you be hiding like those two?" Naruto merely glanced at him, then returned to his book. Blinking in muted surprise, Kakashi decided that the kid had the right idea and promptly produced his own literature to begin perusing. He crouched in position, oddly more comfortable that way, and continued reading. His sharp hearing picked up approaching footsteps and he subtly went on alert, preparing for any surprise his enigma of a student could have. Instead of attacking, however, Naruto merely walked past him and stopped, and then he too crouched and rested himself lightly against his teacher, and continued reading. Feeling oddly amused by the cheek of his student, he let him rest part of his weight on him, all the while keeping a watch for any attempt on the bells tied to his belt. A handful of minutes later, Sasuke obviously got impatient and launched his attack. A couple of kunai were launched from Kakashi's left and instinctively, he shifted to move out of the way. His blood ran cold as he suddenly realized that his movement had thrown his other student off balance, thus making it very likely that Naruto would get hit by the kunai. Without even thinking about it, he spun and scooped up his sensei's son and blurred away from the incoming attack. He spared a moment to ensure that his student was fine before he took off to test his black-haired student. So preoccupied had he been with getting Naruto out of harm's way that he had failed to notice the faint smirk that curled on said student's lips, nor the fact that said student had demonstrated a complete mastery of the Kawarimi no Jutsu. Kakashi instead vanished from the clearing, too fast for any but Naruto to see. Sasuke, who had swiftly changed positions after his failed initial attack, remained crouched on the branch he was on. He quickly threw a punch to his left, only for it to meet his sensei's palm. As though that were a signal, the two burst into a quick and fluid taijutsu exchange. Kakashi ended it by tossing Sasuke away when his hand got close enough to actually touch one of the bells. His eye, however, widened when he noticed the hand seals being woven by Sasuke. His surprised expression never vanished even as a huge fireball leapt the intervening distance between them. When the smoke had finally cleared, Sasuke noticed that nothing remained of his teacher. Looking to the sides and above for him, he was taken off guard when hands erupted from the ground and proceeded to drag him under until only his head remained above ground. Sasuke glanced up in time to watch his teacher disappear with naught but a nice smile thrown his way. Sakura had decided to circle around to Sasuke's position the moment she saw the kunai launched at Kakashi. Ignorant of the noise she made as she moved through the brush, she emerged in a smaller clearing. Looking around to orient herself, she suddenly dove into some bushes, praying that her teacher hadn't noticed her. She peeked out of hiding and sighed in relief when she noticed him still leaning against a tree. Kakashi meanwhile hid a smile at his pink-haired student's adorable naivety. Sakura, rightfully doubtful of her chances against a ninja of Kakashi's caliber, turned to stealthily make her way in the other direction. She heard a rustle in front of her and glanced up into the smiling eye of her teacher. She gasped and recoiled in shock, only to lose sight of him. Looking around frantically, she turned at the sound of a voice coming from the right. Knowing who owned said voice, her face broke out into a relieved and smitten smile as she prepared to meet her Sasuke-kun. The smile fled from her face as she saw Sasuke drag himself into view, his remaining leg bent at an odd angle, fingers missing and blood leaking from numerous wounds on his body. Unable to face the vision before her, she clenched her eyes shut, let loose a scream of abject terror, and slumped into unconsciousness. Musing absently to himself, Kakashi wondered if he had overdone it. Shrugging the thought away, he returned to the clearing and promptly stumbled in surprise when he found his third student still casually reading his book. Moving towards him, he opened his mouth, intending to admonish his lazy student, only to have to duck a sudden airborne spinning kick aimed at his head. Before his eye had finished widening, he promptly switched places with a log in time to avoid getting hit by a ball of lightning fired by a clone originally behind him. Finally getting a moment to orient himself, his head snapped up at the sound of a page being turned to find Naruto still in place reading his book. He furrowed his brows at that and nonchalantly tossed a kunai at his student's head. Naruto simply caught it by its ring and returned it at twice the speed, forcing Kakashi to shift out of the way of the approaching kunai. Hidden in the shadow of that kunai was another one with an explosive tag attached to it, which Kakashi only saw at the last moment. Once the resulting explosion had settled, he stepped out of the place he had switched to and closely regarded Naruto still sitting there and reading. "Well, you're better than I expected. I might actually have to start taking you seriously." Naruto let loose a chuckle and stood up facing his teacher. In another airily synchronized motion, they both slipped their respective books away and prepared to engage one another. Kakashi started off with a blurring punch aimed at Naruto's torso. Slapping the attack aside, Naruto retaliated with a lightning-coated jab to Kakashi's face, smoothly shifting it into an elbow jab and then a rising knee as Kakashi deflected each subsequent attack. They continued in a swift and fluid taijutsu exchange, with Kakashi pleasantly surprised at Naruto's ability to keep up with the pace he was setting. Finally, believing his student to be wide open, Kakashi slammed a kick into an airborne Naruto, only to clench his teeth as lightning coursed through his body from the dispersed lightning clone. He mitigated the damage using his own inherent lightning chakra and pivoted on the spot, fluidly catching and returning the 5 shuriken launched at his back. Quickly forming hand seals, he called out, "Shuriken Cage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique," and the 5 shuriken became 100. Naruto inhaled deeply and then blew out a chakra-laced gust of wind while saying, "Photon, Rankuten, Wind Release, Drilling Air Bullet." The wind bullet slammed the shuriken off course and continued onto Kakashi, who responded with a wind bullet of his own, canceling out Naruto's attack. Kakashi glanced up as he heard, "Rasu, Ikazuchi no Utage, Lightning Burial, Banquet of Lightning," and witnessed Naruto stomp his foot on the ground. He jumped into the air as lightning raced along the floor towards his position. In midair, he was unable to react in time as Naruto faced him and calmly intoned, "Raiton, Raryu Uno Tatsumaki, Lightning Release, Lightning Dragon Tornado," launching a tornado of lightning at Kakashi. The attack impacted with Kakashi and exploded in a surge of lightning. All of a sudden, a kunai was placed along Naruto's jugular and Kakashi lazily spoke, "You definitely have some smooth moves, but you still have a ways to go." Naruto merely glanced at him from the corner of his eye and chuckled. Confused at his student's reaction and completely sure that he wasn't holding a clone, he asked, "Care to share what amuses you?" It was then that he felt the cool length of Naruto's ninjata resting with its tip poised a hairsbreadth from his chest and crackling with tightly leashed lightning chakra. He couldn't help it, he threw back his head and laughed. When he got over his fit of amusement, he disengaged from Naruto just in time for the alarm clock he set to go off, indicating that the test was over. Shaking his head at his most surprising student, he left to fetch the rest of his team. When he arrived at the 3 stumps in the clearing, Sasuke and Sakura in tow, he found Naruto sitting on the middle stump with his book in hand. In a blur, he had Sakura tied to the leftmost post and a gag in her mouth to spare his sensitive ears. He turned to take in his students and pronounced, "Well, you all left." The sound of bells tinkling cut him off and he slowly turned to Naruto, who was still reading, but in whose second hand was held the 2 silver bells. Suppressing the shock that threatened to show on his face, he asked, "Ho broken bar, and at what point during our little dance did you steal those?" Naruto raised an eyebrow at that and said, "During the dance? Never, I actually just stole them from you when you were tying Sakura up there." Seeing the confusion on their faces hidden in Kakashi's case, he continued. "At the beginning, when you were being my knight in shining armor, I filled the bells with chakra at the first step to initiating a successful Kawarimi, and then just now switched them with the chakra-laced air next to me." Silence met his explanation and he looked around to find Sasuke and Sakura looking stunned. Kakashi, with a detectable note of approval in his voice, said, "Very well done, Naruto, very well done indeed. Now, seeing as you have 2 bells, which of the others will you give one to?" Naruto gave off an amused huff, and with a flick of his wrist, Sakura was free of the ropes binding her, and before either she or Sasuke could react to that, he flicked one bell at each of them, which they caught reflexively. Turning to Kakashi, Naruto said, "Your instructions were to obtain a bell, not necessarily maintain possession of it once we did. So, since I have obtained a bell, and so have Sasuke and Sakura, I guess we all pass." Kakashi, seeing the dawning hope on Sakura's face, merely chuckled and replied, "Nice try, Naruto, but I remember saying that you had until noon." Naruto, still looking calm and unruffled, spoke, "That's true, and I'm sure if you look at the clock, you will find that someone had changed the alarm to go off about 20 minutes earlier." Blinking in shock, the others looked at the clock and noticed that Naruto was indeed correct. Noon was in 6 minutes. Giving Naruto a contemplative look tinged with exasperated fondness, Kakashi finally said, "Okay then. I could pass you on that technicality, and I will, only if one of you can tell me the main purpose behind this test." Looking a little perplexed at that statement, Sakura offered up an answer, You wanted to gauge our levels, sensei?" The look on Sasuke's face said that he agreed with Sakura, and so he frowned when Kakashi shook his head. Catching the look on Sasuke's face, he passed him over, correctly deducing that Sasuke had the same thing to say as Sakura, and turned to Naruto for his input. Naruto once again got that look in his eyes that made those listening to him lean forward in complete attention. In a solemn tone that cut through the sudden stillness, he gave his own answer, "You are a Jounin level ninja." Take Kakashi, reputably the strongest current Konoha shinobi, accepting the Hokage. There is no way that a bunch of fresh academy graduates would stand a chance against you. You wanted to gauge our ability to function as a unit, a broken bar as a team, a broken bar as one. You wanted to make us learn that we are rarely, if ever, stronger individually than we are together. After all, those who abandon their mission are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. Once more there was silence after one of Naruto's declarations. This time, however, it was a thoughtful one, filled with burgeoning feelings of camaraderie and team spirit. After getting over his surprise, Kakashi stared at Naruto and realized that he had never seen such a stunning resemblance between Naruto and his sensei as he did in that moment. Sitting there with the wind in his sun-kissed golden hair and his eyes, such a focused and clear blue, Naruto cut a striking figure indeed. Smiling contentedly to himself, Kakashi finally broke the silence. "Yes, that is entirely correct. Those who abandon their mission are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. That is the tenet I live by, and the tenet I hope you will all come to live by in the future. Congratulations, you all pass. Meet me on the bridge tomorrow morning for our first official day as Team 7. Kakashi watched his team's interactions from his perch in the tree. His presence was so muted that only Anbu level ninja and above could have possibly detected him. Still, knowing that, he found himself unsurprised when Naruto flicked a brief and almost unnoticeable glance in his direction. Noticing that he had a few minutes before he had to make his entrance, he allowed himself to muse on the 2 months that had passed since the formation of Team 7. He was simultaneously both amazed and stumped by the dynamic which existed between his 3 students. He was amazed because he had never seen, never even heard, of such an efficient team. Their missions rating, so far, averaged a staggering 98%. What stumped him, however, was that regardless of how successful their mission history, there was nothing even remotely resembling teamwork between them. Kakashi knew that Sasuke felt threatened by Naruto's heretofore unseen proficiency. It took 1 sparring session and 2 minutes for Kakashi to accept what the belt test had hinted at. Naruto was heads and shoulders above his peers. Hell, the kid was heads above some chunin in the village. Sasuke repeatedly got frustrated anytime he had to spar with Naruto. No matter what moves he pulled out, whatever clever tricks he thought he had up his sleeve, Naruto remained unruffled and undefeated. Compounding the issue is the fact that Naruto clearly had no interest in becoming Sasuke's rival. The only time that he ever agreed to spar with him was during team spars, when Kakashi would ask him to. The sheer disinterest set Sasuke's teeth on edge, forcing him to give his all in every encounter they had, all for naught. Kakashi remembered, a few weeks after passing his team, when he asked Naruto who had taught him taijutsu. You see, he asked because the boy's taijutsu style was almost like nothing he had ever seen. Being friends with a taijutsu expert like Mayudoge ensured that Kakashi was well educated on a variety of taijutsu styles. Every time he sparred with his student, he noticed that his moves were like variations of standard taijutsu katas. It was almost like listening to a different dialect of a language he knew well. When he asked Naruto for the identity of his taijutsu teacher, the answer he received perplexed him. Naruto had replied, "I learned from a broken bar life, I guess from the striking snake and the stalking tiger, from the leaping monkey and the hunting wolf, from the flowing river and the turbulent wind, from everything around me. Broken bar from life." Kakashi had wondered at what his student meant. He could never have known that Naruto was actually telling him the truth. Centuries into his eternal existence, after he had learned and mastered all the taijutsu styles that existed in whatever reality he found himself in, Naruto sought to go deeper. He visited mountain monasteries, looking for the ancient monks who had discovered the art of taijutsu. From them he learned the history of taijutsu and its origins. He learned how the first of them had observed the way the animals and environment around them had behaved. He learned to watch how the relentless yet fluid motion of a river wore away the immovable rock in its path. He learned to observe as the wind went from peaceful and calm to ferocious and cutting in an instant. He went back to the source and learned it all. The result was a taijutsu style that comprised of the strengths of each style, all refined to their purest forms. Much like with Chinese whispers, the passing down of taijutsu styles from generation to generation introduced additions that resulted in the final form being changed from its original ancestor. Hence the reason why Naruto's moves seem similar to some of the styles Kakashi was familiar with. He was seeing the taijutsu styles in their pure and unchanged form. Nonetheless, the fact remained that Naruto was at a level that put him permanently out of reach of his teammates, though Sasuke refused to believe that Naruto would always be the better shinobi. In his spars with his blonde student, Kakashi always won, of course, but doing so always required more effort on his part. However, after a handful of spars, he had realized that even though Naruto always lost against him, he almost never took a hit. At first he had wondered if his memory was just faulty, but after the next 3 spars, he realized that he was right the first time. Concerned that he was being too easy on his student, he started to kick their spars into high gear at about mid-Chunin level A and noticed that Naruto began to sustain a few more injuries. So, every time he sparred with Naruto, he fought him at a level noticeably higher than he did with Sasuke, which Sasuke noticed, of course. Still, even fighting him at a more demanding pace, Kakashi still suspected that Naruto wasn't giving it his all, but he had no proof of it and so dismissed his suspicions. Sasuke had spent the past few minutes staring at his other male teammate standing at the railing on the bridge, staring at the water passing by underneath. It had been 2 months and still he was no closer to surpassing Naruto. It irked him something fierce that a no-name like Naruto was so far above him in terms of skill that he couldn't even touch him in their spars. What was even worse was that Naruto always looked unruffled, no matter what Sasuke threw his way. Sasuke had taken to perusing the hidden jutsu library located in the Uchiha clan compound. He practiced some of the D-ranked and C-ranked fire jutsu, hoping to find something he could use against his teammate. Nothing ever worked. He would launch a fireball at Naruto, only to be forced to dodge his own fireball combined with a wind bullet. Somehow, Naruto was always a step ahead of him and it annoyed him greatly. He kept trying to unlock his Sharingan, fully confident that Naruto would be no match for him then, but was having no luck there. Putting aside his thoughts on the matter, Sasuke turned his gaze away from Naruto and stared into space. It had been a long 2 months for Sakura, and things did not seem to be looking up. After Kakashi had passed them as a team, she felt as though her dream had finally come true. She was on a team with her Sasuke-kun and nothing was ever going to come between them again. Her dreams were ruthlessly shattered during the first spar she had with Sasuke. She had managed to convince herself that he wouldn't actually fight her. Her delusions had lasted up until a spinning kick from him had slammed into her face, knocking her out. She woke up to find herself sitting by the side of the training ground and no Sasuke worrying over her. No, he was instead involved in a spar with Naruto, which he was losing. Still, she managed to repress that incident somehow and went back to being a fangirl, albeit a slightly more subdued one. As more and more rejections from Sasuke piled up with no buffering declarations from Naruto, she found herself less and less able to summon up the same feelings of adoration she once held for Sasuke. Over time, she slowly became less enamored with him and began to think for herself. She also began to pay more attention to the lessons Kakashi attempted to teach them. She had improved somewhat, and now, she was at the level of a proper academy graduate and not just a civilian. Regardless of her change in attitude, she still had moments where she would forget herself and revert to her former behavior. If she were honest with herself, she would realize that her change to a slightly more serious kunoichi was still related to her desire for Sasuke. Having spent so long with him, she had come to understand that there was almost nothing Sasuke hated more than weakness. Therefore, her taking her kunoichi skills more seriously was rooted in a desire to finally have Sasuke acknowledge her, yet her efforts were for naught. At first she was confused, until she noticed that every time they had a team meeting, Sasuke would always stare at Naruto, a broken bar Naruto. She could tell that it was Naruto's apparent skill which surprised and annoyed Sasuke. Still, she couldn't see past her jealousy and slowly, bitterness began to fester in her heart. She threw a slightly malicious look at Naruto, who was still staring at the river which flowed underneath the bridge. Kakashi shook himself out of his thoughts and noting the time, prepared to make his entrance. He saw that Naruto was having one of his rare moments of introspection and as such had his guard down somewhat. Kakashi timed his attack perfectly without any warning signs whatsoever. He was suddenly standing beside Naruto, his leg already in a smooth sweeping motion and his hand jabbing forward. Naruto had been completely aware of Kakashi's presence and thus he could have avoided what happened next if he wanted to. However, in keeping with Kakashi's intended result, Naruto was flipped over the railing he was leaning against, and splashed into the river below. Sasuke and Sakura both felt petty vindication at how wet Naruto was when he finally emerged from the water. With a nice smile, Kakashi stated, "That's a good look on you, Naruto." Naruto froze for a moment, and then he slowly turned towards Kakashi and smiled at him. With a feeling of lead in his stomach, Kakashi remembered who it was he had just pranked Akano as #1 prankster. Kakashi shook off his dawning feeling of terror and turned to head towards the mission office to obtain a mission for his team. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Naruto make a hand seal and channel chakra heated air along his body to dry himself off. Shaking his head at his ever-surprising student, he returned to his thoughts. He had finally decided to take his team on their first C-rank mission. He was fully aware that the only reason he felt comfortable doing so was because of the amounts of faith he had in Naruto's skill. He was confident that if anything came up, Naruto would be able to get his team out of it, and if he couldn't, well, he was not called Sharingan no Kakashi for nothing. With that final thought, he returned to his ever-present Kaka novel and continued to walk towards his destination. Naruto calmly walked behind Kakashi and in between his other two teammates. Since the making of Team 7 2 months prior, he had been aware of the feelings of his teammates towards his person. Not being a vindictive person by nature, he never went out of his way to exacerbate the situation, but he wasn't one to roll over for anyone either. He found that after living for so long as he had, it was practically impossible to care about the bruised and battered egos of little children or the petty jealousy inspired from puppy crushes. One ray of sunshine though, was his relationship with his sensei. It felt kind of nice to have an older brother figure in him, one who he could horse around with from time to time. He realized that the incident from 2 years ago must have played a part in scaring Kakashi out of his indifference. Regardless, he quite enjoyed the interactions he shared with Kakashi. His fondness for Kakashi notwithstanding, he was going to get him back for his actions that morning. So, as they approached the door to the mission office, Naruto cast his senses out to confirm that Truka and the Sandaime were present, along with quite a number of other shinobi. A broken bar showtime. As Team 7 approached the door, Naruto shifted his gait to make it seem as though he were attempting, and failing, to conceal a limp. Before Kakashi or any of his other teammates could wonder at that, they entered the mission office and immediately drew the gaze of the Sandaime. Sarutobi's sharp eyes had easily picked up the inconsistency in Naruto's stride, and taking into consideration the boy's phenomenal healing factor, he knew that for Naruto to still be limping now, he must have sustained a grave injury indeed. With barely detectable concern, he asked Naruto, "Are you alright?" Naruto glanced up with wide blue eyes, looking like a deer caught in headlights. He then promptly blushed to the roots of his hair and began to fidget a broken bar in place. With rising concern on the Sandaime's part and slowing dawning horror on Kakashi's, Sarutobi leaned forward with furrowed brows. By this point, Ruka had also noticed that something was wrong, and he too focused on Naruto. Naruto opened his mouth, and in a coy and shy tone, he said, "I'm a broken bar, it's just that a broken bar, I'm a broken bar, it's just that it was my first time doing that with a man of his caliber." Pina broken bar drove a broken bar silence. Sarutobi's face looked to be carved out of granite, and Ruka's eyes had the dawning light of intended murder in them. The rest of the shinobi present had paused what they were doing and focused on what was happening. Noticing that he now had the full attention of the entire room, Naruto had to fight to maintain his innocent Section 8 as he wove his magic. "I'm a broken bar late yesterday, when we were doing Ida broken bar Kaka-sensei and Ia broken bar. It was slightly painful since it was my first time doing that." At this point, Kakashi was staring dumbly at his blonde-haired student, his book hanging limply from his fingers. Peripherally he was aware of the rising killing intent emanating from the Sandaime and Ruka, as well as the increasing amounts of suspicion and contempt in the gazes of his fellow shinobi. For all that, he could do nothing but stutter out, "What a broken bar, you a broken bar, Naruto a broken bar, what are you talking about?" Naruto looked down and twisted his fingers in his shirt, blatantly ripping off the moves of a certain Hyuga princess. He glanced at Kakashi from the corner of his eye and his face flushed further. He then looked up and gained a dreamy look in his blue eyes, which combined with his flushed cheeks presented such an entrancing image that people watching could see how Kakashi might have done a broken bar to him. Never one to stop while he was ahead, Naruto twisted the knife further with a dreamy tone to go with the look in his eyes. He continued, "Yesterday I a broken bar the movement of our body as a broken bar, the repeated thud of flesh hitting flesh a broken bar, the grunts and pants of exertion a broken bar, the sweat and smell from such physical activity a broken bar, feeling him all over me broken bar, telling me how good I looked weight a broken bar, and the pleasant ache that told me I was going to be deliciously sore the next day a broken bar, Kaka-sensei was a little broken bar, a broken bar, but I liked title broken bar. It let me feel it properly." At this point, some people were discreetly wiping off bloodied noses. Sakura had turned bright red in the middle of Naruto's recounting, and Sasuke had a blush suffusing his face. Almost simultaneously, the two glanced at Kakashi and shifted away from him as though he were about to pounce and do that to them as well. The sound of a pipe being broken by a too strong grip cut through the silence in the room. Slowly and carefully, Kakashi turned to look at the Sandaime and instead found the Kami no Shinobi staring back at him. Before the Hokage could leave his desk and extract Kakashi's entrails via his nose, Ruka was on his feet, glaring murder at Kakashi and spat out, "Naruto, are you telling me that a broken bar persona broken bar touched you yesterday?" Like a switch being thrown, Naruto was suddenly back to his usual calm and aloof self. Before the room could fully adjust to such an abrupt change in demeanor, Naruto smoothly replied, "Of course he did, Ruka-sensei. It's kind of hard to avoid physical contact during an all-out spar." Then with an amused twinkle in his eye, he continued, "Why? What did you think I was talking about?" The entire room practically face-faulted. They all looked up at the sound of a shutter clicking to find Naruto gleefully taking numerous pictures of Kakashi's pale, gaping, and stunned visage. The silence that had descended was suddenly broken by muffled snickers from the eternal Chunimperi Katetsu and Izumo. Like a dam giving way, the entire room erupted into laughter at Kakashi's expense, with even the Hokage chuckling to himself, a broken bar, and to think that I thought that Naruto had given up his mischievous ways. After the room had quieted down some, with a few snickers let loose every now and then, Kakashi collected himself and, trying to act like nothing happened, stepped forward to request a C-rank mission for his team. However, he internally vowed to get his blue-eyed student back for this. The 4 members of Team 7 walked alongside the caravan at various points, Kakashi in the far back, Sakura and Sasuke along the middle, and Naruto in front. They were currently on their 3rd C-rank mission to safely escort one of Konoha's more successful merchants to the Land of Fire's capital city. Their client, Hayato Ikaru, had received some threatening letters from an anonymous source. As such, the Hokage had offered the service of one of his best Chunin teams, a Team 7A led by legendary ninja, Sharingan no Kakashi. Kakashi had informed his students that unlike their first 2 C-rank missions, a simple deliveries that went smoothly, this mission they were on had a high possibility of bandit action. He was not worried though, not from misplaced arrogance, but from complete confidence he had in the skills of the members of his team. The past 3 months since his team was formed has seen significant improvements in 2 of his students. He had refined Sasuke's taijutsu and added a few fire jutsu to his arsenal. For Sakura he had procured a few medical jutsu scrolls and some genjutsu scrolls as well, while working on improving her abysmal physical attributes like strength and stamina. As for his last student, well, he provided something of a sparring partner to help keep Naruto in tip-top shape. He had long since come to accept that his 3rd student was significantly more skilled than any other in his generation, and that he would never know just how powerful. He had also taught his students the tree walking exercise, although he got the distinct impression that Naruto was just humoring him. He had also made an effort to discover his students' chakra affinities and found that Sasuke had a major affinity for fire, and a minor one for lightning. Sakura had a single affinity for earth-based jutsu. And Naruto, surprisingly, had a major affinity for lightning, though he had demonstrated the ability to use any of the other 4 chakra types. A few decades after Naruto had begun jumping realities, he had realized that he needed to do something to keep his life from being dull and monotonous. So, he came up with a system where during a new life, he would stick to one branch of the ninja arts. Sometimes he would mainly focus on taijutsu, and maybe even only on one style. Other times, he became for kinjutsu what Meidoge was for taijutsu. And yet other times he only utilized combination affinities like Hayaton, ice release, Makoton, wood release, and so on. He still remembered a particular timeline in which Gaara was too far gone to say if he had gone full Bajuu in the stadium during the Chunin selection exams. Before chaos had fully descended, Naruto had calmly clapped his hands and in a voice that cut through the rising panic, he intoned, Makoton Hijutsu, Jukai Koten, wood release secret technique, birth of the dense woodland. Jaws had dropped in stunned shock as numerous trees promptly erupted from the ground, bound, and then subdued at Ibi no Shukaku. Ah, good times. Regardless, this time around he had chosen to present lightning as his main chakra affinity. Naruto quickly refocused on the present as his acute sense picked up the presence of a huge number of civilians somewhere down the path. Utilizing the prograde signal, he subtly notified Sasuke and Sakura of an impending ambush. He was confident that Kakashi was already aware of the hidden bandits. With practiced movements, The civilians in the merchant train moved closer to the carriages as Sasuke and Sakura spread out in preparation. Sakura fought to keep her hands from shaking as she realized that she would soon have to put into practice all that Kakashi had taught her these past 3 months. Sasuke clenched and unclenched his fists at the only sign of his nerves, before he silently berated himself for such weakness. He reminded himself that he was at a level where common bandits were merely nuisances. Furthermore, and here he threw a glance at his ever unruffled teammate, this was a chance to show Naruto that he was more than his equal. He took a deep breath and released it just as the first of the bandits sprung out of hiding. Sasuke's arms were already in motion, blurring as he released shuriken after shuriken towards the group approaching from the left of the caravan. Sakura hesitated only a moment before she too joined Sasuke in taking out as many of the bandits as she could before they entered close range. By the time the attacking bandits had gotten close enough to engage in close combat, half of them had fallen to the deadly cloud of projectiles hurled at them. Sakura was not even aware that tears were flowing from her eyes as her relatively weak taijutsu was more than enough to take down bandit after bandit. Sasuke's eyes were grim and focused as he cut through the group of bandits around him. He didn't even flinch as his kunai penetrated through the skull of an attacking bandit. The night of his family's massacre had long since desensitized him to such bloodshed. Naruto and Kakashi had ignored the approaching bandits, continuing to read their respective books. The bandits, seeing their disinterest, became incensed and surged on more vigorously. The moment they entered into close range with Kakashi, it was all over. Kakashi's figure flickered in place, and one by one, like puppets with their strings cut, the attacking bandits began to fall with their throats slit. Naruto, on the other hand, did not react until the bandit in front of the charging horde was practically breathing on him. The lead bandit screamed out, "Die!" and brought his raised sword down on Naruto. Sasuke and Sakura whirled around at the sound of the maddened shout in time to witness the descending blade bite into Naruto's shoulder, stopping at his chest. Before a ferocious grin could form on the bandit's face, Naruto's calm voice carried on the wind, originating from the top of the leading carriage, "Kai." The Naruto who had just gotten cut exploded with a crackling surge of supercharged lightning. The bandit in contact with him was flash fried to ash instantly, while powerful bolts of lightning leapt from surrounding bandit to surrounding bandit, short-circuiting their brains and stopping their hearts. After a several seconds long laxo, all was finally still. The disturbed dust cleared to reveal the charred and smoking corpses of about 10 bandits. The civilians, Sasuke and Sakura all stared at the scene of destruction, until they were distracted by the sound of a page being turned. They all looked to the top of the first carriage to find Naruto still reading his damnable book, as though he had not just wiped out a group of bandits in one move. A few minutes after the ambush, after Sakura had finished throwing up, though her shakes still persisted, the caravan resumed its journey, with the ninjas in their original positions. Kakashi had interrogated one of the surviving bandits to find out if there were any more attackers lying in wait. He learned that one of Hayato's rivals had contracted an infamous bandit group to rob and kill him. The first ambush had been carried out by a third of the bandit army, the rest laid in wait further down. They even had 1 or 2 genin dropouts among them. Kakashi had deemed his team sufficient enough to proceed. Nearly an hour later, Naruto and Kakashi picked up on the presence of the remaining bandits. Noticing that the main force was concentrated in one place further down the road, Kakashi decided that they would take the fight to them. Signaling his students to gather around, Kakashi laid out a plan of attack. Sakura would provide long-range support using kunai and shuriken, while Naruto and Sasuke would engage the bandits in close combat. Kakashi had chosen to observe his students, and would only step in if needed. Getting a nod from his students, he motioned for them to move out. Sakura received a scroll from Naruto and, realizing that it was a storage scroll, opened it to find a ready supply of kunai. She blinked in surprise at the gesture and only then realized that she had used up her supply of projectiles in the previous broken bar. She quickly cut that thought off before she could be sick again. She took a deep breath and got into position up in a tree that afforded her full view of the gathered bandits. Sasuke circled around to approach the gathered bandits from the other side, while Naruto went straight ahead, a classic pincer maneuver. The 70 bandits had no idea of the events that were about to befall them. The first indication that something was wrong was when the bandit closest to Sakura's position slumped over with a kunai sticking out of his forehead. A fireball launched from Sasuke's position took out 3 bandits standing close to each other, further worsening the chaos that had descended on the gathered attackers. Into this chaos, Naruto appeared fluid and silent like the wind. He moved through the group of gathered bandits, his ninjato flashing like quicksilver, ending lives with every sweeping movement. Even Sasuke had been momentarily stunned at the grace with which Naruto used his blade. Shaking himself out of it, he drew dual kunais and charged into the fray. He killed bandits left and right using the Akaya Interceptor style, as well as interspacing his taijutsu assaults with the Grand Fireball Jutsu. Sakura rained kunai down on the bandits from above, taking care not to hit any of her teammates. A few minutes after they began, all the bandits lay dead at their feet. Sasuke was panting and covered in blood. He cast a gaze at Naruto to find him unwinded and untouched by any of the blood he had spilt. In that moment, looking at Naruto calmly surveying the massacre he had just wrought, Sasuke realized just what his teammate was capable of. He allowed himself to acknowledge that sometimes, Naruto simply scared him. Sakura was sitting slumped on the branch she had been standing on. Thankfully, this time she wasn't throwing up, she was merely shaking. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Naruto turn to face her, his eyes narrowed. Before she could wonder at his actions, he disappeared from her vision, only to appear next to her with his sword blocking the katana that had been aimed at her neck. She barely had time to flinch in shock before Naruto kicked her attacker away, and vanished to take care of him. Sasuke had seen Naruto appear next to Sakura in time to save her life. Since he was alert, he was able to sense the ninja approaching from behind. He smoothly pivoted, deflected the strike aimed at his torso and responded with a punishing blow that connected with his opponent's head. The blow forced some distance between the two combatants and Sasuke took a moment to assess his attacker. The other ninja was obviously at most a genin and Sasuke was confident that he could take him. He surged forward and engaged his opponent in a taijutsu battle which he ruthlessly dominated. Finally, after a few minutes, Sasuke created an opening into which he buried a kunai and watched dispassionately as his assailant bled out. He turned around only to receive a boot to the face that launched him into a tree. With his head ringing and his lungs struggling to breathe, he forced his eyes open to meet the malicious gaze of another ninja, at this one obviously above genin level. He forced himself to his feet, preparing to engage this new enemy, knowing that he was quite possibly too drained to emerge victorious. The attacking ninja wove hand seals and allowed a bloodthirsty grin to appear on his face as he pronounced, "Doton, Doryuden, Earth Release, Earth Dragon Bullet." Sasuke watched grimly as a dragon head made of earth emerged from the ground and aimed at him. His muscles coiled, preparing to launch him to the side, when both combatants were interrupted by another voice intoning, "Raiton, Raku, Lightning Release, Lightning Ball." A bright blue ball of tightly leashed lightning plowed through the head of the rising earth dragon and continued onto the enemy ninja, who only just jumped out of the way. Naruto landed in front of Sasuke, facing their mutual enemy. Sasuke, who was too tired to put up a fuss about being rescued, allowed his body to slide down the tree he was leaning against. A clone seemed to step out of Naruto's back, and it moved forward to tend to his wounds using a first aid kit Naruto handed it. Without taking his eyes off his opponent, Naruto spoke with his ever calm tone, "You are the last enemy left alive. Surrender and I will spare you." Both Sasuke and the ninja were taken aback at the finality in Naruto's statement. Shaking off any hesitation the Chunin level ninja might have felt, He prepared to engage this obvious genin. Up in the branches, hidden from all but Naruto's senses, Kakashi watched as his blonde-haired student defended his teammate. He decided to take this opportunity to see if he could finally gauge his enigmatic student's level. The enemy Chunin rapidly covered the distance between Naruto and himself and launched a spinning kick at his head. Naruto's right arm came up and blocked the opening attack. Not giving his assailant any chance to recover, Naruto's left hand came up with his ninjato aim to pierce the ninja's chest, only to go through a log as his opponent replaced himself. Naruto ducked as a katana cut through the place his neck had been moments before. He spun around and deflected a thrust aimed at his chest, and continued to parry all attacks coming his way with casual ease. He noticed that the more he toyed around with his opponent, the angrier and sloppier his motions became. Deciding that he needed one more push, he turned his body away from his enemy, and while his right hand kept on parrying all attacks aimed at him, his left hand reached into his pouch, pulled out his ever-faithful book, and he began to read. All the people present in the clearing gaped at him, the attacking ninja included. With a vein throbbing in his head, he stomped his foot and screamed out, "Doton, Dorsu, Earth Release, Rising Stone Spears." The ground around Naruto surged upwards in the form of hardened spikes of stone. Before any of the rising spears could harm him, Naruto stretched his sword out and spun his body in a circle while saying, "Raiton, Kanshkia, Lightning Release, Wave of Inspiration." Lightning surged down his blade and erupted in a straight line from the tip, resulting in a 10-foot-long blade of condensed lightning chakra with which he described a circle, 10 feet in radius. The lightning cut through the spikes as though they were not even there. When he came out of his spin, he was facing the ninja, and before the ninja could launch another attack, Naruto indicated that he should look at his feet. Almost against his will, his gaze dropped down to find a kunai planted in front of him. Bewildered, he looked left and right to find kunai there as well, almost as though he were standing in a triangle. With a dawning sense of dread, he looked up in time to hear Naruto speak, "Raiton, Kaminari Shibari, Lightning Release, Thunder Binding." Lightning burst forth from each of the 3 kunai to form a pyramid of crackling energy. The ninja struck one of the walls of the barrier with his sword, only to drop it as a current was grounded via his body, resulting in a painful shock. Seeing that the enemy was safely contained, Naruto turned a bland look up at Kakashi's hiding place, causing his sensei's eyes to widen in shock. Brushing off his surprise, he shunshined to his student's position and patted him on his head with a nice smile. Sakura had gotten out of her tree already and was finishing the job Naruto's clone had started in bandaging up Sasuke's wound. Both she and Sasuke had been stunned to see the way their teammate handled the enemy ninja, both fully aware that neither of them could have faced an opponent of that caliber. Kakashi turned his attention to the Chunin, who paled when he recognized the legendary ninja that was eyeing him like one of his Ninken would eye a steak. Motioning for Naruto to release the lightning prison, he blurred forward and took hold of the Chunin, then vanished to question him. The screams of pain and terror, which originated from the direction Kakashi took the enemy ninja, served to remind his 3 students that for all his laziness and goofing off, their sensei was still the legendary shinobi, copy ninja Kakashi. Kakashi finished interrogating his prisoner and determined that there would be no more ambushes along the way. He returned to his students and instructed them on how to clean up after such battles, even showing them how to scavenge any useful items. After the 3 students of Team 7 had cleared up the dead bodies, with Sasuke getting to use his fire jutsu on the bodies, Kakashi led them back to the caravan. He was pleasantly surprised to note that Naruto had left a few clones to make sure that the caravan remained unharmed while they were taking care of the last of the bandits. In short order, the merchant train resumed its journey and with no further complications, finally arrived at their destination. Kakashi got the mission scroll signed and turned to lead his team back to Konoha. The cry of a messenger falcon drew his attention, and noticing the Konoha symbol on its band, he raised a hand for it to land on. He retrieved the message and read it quickly. When he realized that he did not need to respond, He allowed the falcon to leave and turned to face his team. His voice was grim as he spoke. Team 10 has requested immediate backup. Their Jounin sensei is injured and we are the closest team to them. Sakura perked up at the opportunity to meet Inoue again and asked him where they were going. The answer came to Naruto before Kakashi spoke it, the land of waves. Kakashi's sensitive nose finally picked up the scent of a large body of water up ahead. Finally. We're almost there. He had been leading his team at a punishing pace, cutting a direct path from the land of fire's capital to the land of water. They had had to stop for a break once, when Sakura missed the jump to the branch ahead of her due to fatigue. Only Naruto's quick reaction had saved her from serious injury. He had been glad to notice that while Sasuke had been slightly winded, he could still clearly continue for longer. Neither he nor Naruto had even felt the exertion of the pace yet. After that quick break, they had resumed their tree jumping towards wave and were now finally approaching it. Kakashi stealthily led his team on a circuitous route to the target's house, intending to conceal their presence from any hostiles in the area, for as long as he could. When they got close enough to the client's house, they dropped down to walk the rest of the way. Walking at the head of the formation, his lack of reading material expressing the level of his seriousness, Kakashi cut an intimidating figure. Without breaking stride, he casually called out, "Jin and Ara, report." Sakura and Sasuke were startled, though Sasuke hid his surprise better and turned to notice Shikamaru emerge from a shadowed portion of the forest they were cutting through. Running a lazy gaze over the team, he replied in a voice tinged with relief, "We encountered the first sign of hostilities a few hours after leaving Konoha 82 Chunin, the Demon Brothers. Asuma-sensei took them out, then got the full story from Tazuna-san. Ino wanted to continue and eventually managed to convince Sensei to as well. Next we encountered a rank missing in Momoki Zabuza. Sensei engaged with him and got injured, though he was able to injure him in return." Given a simple nod to his report, Kakashi continued on towards the house in the clearing, Shikamaru following along with the rest of Team 7. Before he got to the door, it was flung open to reveal the visibly relieved face of Yamanaka Ino. Rushing forward, the blonde-haired kunoichi spoke in an anxious tone, "Kakashi-sensei, thank Kami you're here. Asuma-sensei is hurt, can you help him?" Giving an eye smile, Kakashi replied, "I'm sure Sakura can be of some help with that. Why don't we go inside to see him?" At the mention of Sakura, Ino finally noticed the students that trailed behind the legendary Jounin. She cast a disbelieving glance at Sakura, completely doubting her usefulness in the situation, and then turned an adoring smile on Sasuke. Sakura's buried fangirl reared its head and she growled at Ino to back off. Before the girls could start going at it, Naruto cut in between them, successfully distracting them from their petty arguments and reminding them of the seriousness of the situation. Sasuke didn't bother with them and simply followed the male members of his team into the house. With a shake of his head, Shikamaru followed after the two girls who had scrambled to follow Sasuke inside. The members of Team 7 entered a guest room, after greeting Tazuna's daughter, Tsunami, to find Shaji keeping watch over his sensei. Asuma's labored breathing was the only sound in the room, and even from the door, Kakashi could make out the bandages and dried blood on his torso. Motioning for Sakura to attend to his downed comrade, he stepped inside the room. Sakura nervously stepped forward and initiated the Shous no Jutsu, mystical palm technique, and began to assess Asuma's condition. The gathered members of Team 10 felt rising hope as they watched Sakura work on their sensei. Their hopes were somewhat dashed though when Sakura ended the jutsu and spoke, with an embarrassed blush on her face, "I'm sorry sensei, there's not much that I know how to do yet. I was able to diagnose him to find that he had damaged ribs and has lost some blood. I was also able to heal some of the internal damage, but I can't do anything for his fever." Kakashi nodded to show her that it was fine, and that any little thing helps. Before Ino could let her anxiety get the best of her and cause her to deride Sakura, Naruto stepped past them, the green glow of the Shous no Jutsu illuminating Asuma's pale features. He placed his right hand on his chest and the left on his forehead. In a clinical tone, Naruto began to list the damages. He has 3 cracked ribs and 2 broken ones. He has lost a lot of blood and has internal bruising on some of his major organs. The major external injury is the cut running down his chest, and he has a high fever. Before the stunned and disbelieving gaze of the gathered ninjas, Asuma's breathing became less labored and some of his color returned to his face. They watched in amazement as the visible bruises seemed to age from angry purple to the yellow of almost mended skin. Even the massive cut running along his torso was healed somewhat. With a final surge of green chakra, Naruto moved back as Asuma took a deep breath and opened his eyes. The members of Team 10 forgot their surprise in favor of crowding around their sensei, expressing their relief at his return to consciousness. Naruto calmly ignored Kakashi's probing gaze and Sasuke and Sakura's stunned and annoyed looks, all in favor of watching the reunion of Team 10. Asuma finally turned his eyes to the amused gaze of his fellow Jounin, and spoke in a slightly questioning tone, knowing that Kakashi wasn't all that capable with medical jutsu. "Ah, so they sent you, huh? Thanks for patching me up." Kakashi lazily motioned towards Naruto, causing Asuma's eyes to widen in surprise, before he gave the blue-eyed ninja look of gratitude. Naruto merely inclined his head in acceptance of his thanks. He then said, "I'll leave you guys to it and go and check up on the clones I left to watch the house." Before Shikamaru could fully berate himself for getting distracted from his watch, Naruto glided out of the room, and not too long after, they heard the sound of the front door closing. Giving Kakashi a look, expressing that he wanted to talk to him about whatever that was later, Asuma turned back to reassuring his students. Later in the evening, after Kakashi and Asuma had talked in more detail about the mission and their respective students, the 8 Shinobas sat around the dining table, along with Tazuna and Tsunami. An initially empty seat was left beside Tsunami for her son, Inari. During the meal, Inari kept scowling at the ninja seated around the table, slowly causing Sakura and Sasuke to become uncomfortable, having not had to put up with his behavior before. He seemed to find fault especially with Naruto, who throughout the meal had blatantly ignored him, not even giving any response to his dark glowers. After dinner, Naruto thanked Tsunami for the meal and promptly left the house, after mentioning that he would take the first watch. Asuma wanted to protest, thinking that Naruto had already done enough for the day, but he relented when Kakashi pointed out that the kid had more stamina than any 2 of the ninjas present, combined. Naruto had been sitting on the roof for 30 minutes before he heard the sound of someone climbing up to his spot, attempting to do so without being noticed. With no prior warning to indicate that he was aware of the person's presence, he spoke softly, "Is there something you needed, Sasuke?" Startled at being detected, Sasuke's brows furrowed before he decided to continue with the reason he had followed his teammate. Clenching his fists and speaking in a forceful and demanding tone, Sasuke replied, "I want to know where you learned the things that you know." Taking Naruto's silence as confusion, he elaborated, "A few years ago you were just a dead last wannabe ninja who was never going to amount to anything. Then you vanished for 3 months, only to return like this. I want to know how?" Without turning his head, Naruto spoke into the air, "And you, Sakura? Do you also want to know the answers to these questions?" Sasuke twitched, and then internally berated himself for letting his need for answers distract him from his surroundings. Sakura scrambled fully onto the roof and spoke up with a huff, "Yes, I do. Where did you learn the medical jutsu you used? How did you learn to use a sword like you did? Also, how come you can do all those things like broken bar tree walking and even CLS, silent ninjutsu?" Sasuke's annoyance at Sakura's intrusion was forgotten as she pointed out other pertinent issues. Together, the both of them turned demanding gazes on their final teammate. Naruto's shoulders tensed, causing the other 2 to lean forward, thinking that they were getting to him. They flinched back in surprise the next moment as Naruto threw back his head and let loose belly-aching laughter. Sasuke and Sakura were too annoyed at being laughed at to appreciate how pleasantly smooth and deep Naruto's laugh was. After he had gotten over his amusement, Naruto stood and turned to face his teammates, fully aware that Asuma, Kakashi, and the Genin of Team 10 were listening into their conversation. His face was devoid from any of his previous amusement, and with a serious tone that cut deeply into his demanding comrades, he said, "Get over yourselves. You seem to be suffering under the absurd belief that I owe you any explanations. When I was the deadliest wannabe ninja, did you not ridicule and deride me? Now that I am skilled and capable of, you believe yourself privy to my secrets? Ridiculous. We are teammates, and inherent in that description is the understanding that during missions I watch your back and expect you to watch mine. However, nowhere in that definition is the understanding that you have any right to know anything personal about me. We are teammates, but you spent years showing me that we are not friends." Over the course of his speech, Sakura had been growing more shamefaced, while Sasuke had grown tenser and tenser. Neither of them had anything to say to the stark truth that Naruto had just hurled into their faces, and so they turned to leave. Concealed in the shadows, Asuma and Kakashi shared grim looks, while in the house, Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino shared confused glances. The next morning, Tsunami's cry of surprise had most of the present ninja hurry downstairs to find out what was wrong. They stopped at the entrance to the dining room when they noticed the breakfast spread that was laid out on the table. While it was true that most of it was made of fish, it still smelled and looked appetizing. Tsunami's surprised look revealed that she was not the one responsible for the wonderful meal. Naruto, appearing from the kitchen, carrying what looked like tea, answered the question of who prepared the meal. Tsunami turned to him to protest, but he interrupted her with a shake of his head and a nice smile. Smiling fondly at the kind young man, she sat in the seat he pulled up for her. The others got over their surprise and took their seats at the table. Choji was the first to try some of the food. The others watched as his eyes widened in obvious surprise, before he began to pile on more food, which was the signal for everyone else to tuck in. Naruto graciously accepted the compliments that came from their hosts and the members of Team 10. He also mentioned to Tsunami that the rest of the fish he caught was placed in the freezer. Thanking him again for his help, she began to clear away the dishes, turning down the kids' offers to help her. Kakashi gathered the 6 young ninjas around him and began to explain the situation in Wave and how they would go about completing their mission. "I discussed with Asuma, and we came to the conclusion that the Hunter Ninja who interrupted your encounter with Zabuza is an accomplice of his. Taking into consideration the damage Asuma was able to inflict on him, I give him 4 more days before he is recovered enough to launch another attack. So, here is what we'll do: Choji, Ino and Shikamaru will guard Tazuna today, while Sakura will stick with Tsunami during the day. Sasuke and Naruto, I want you two to gather more information about the situation in Wave. We will meet again after dinner to share our findings. Any questions?" Seeing that none of them had any questions, he motioned them to move out. The students of Team 10 followed Tazuna to the bridge, while Sakura left to join Tsunami in the kitchen. Sasuke threw a glance at Naruto, then left to complete his mission. Naruto stood up to leave as well, but he was stopped by Kakashi's voice. "Naruto, a broken bar." Naruto glanced at him at that pause. Sighing, he turned fully to face his teacher and said, "Kakashi-sensei, if this is about what happened yesterday night, don't worry. No matter what my feelings about them are, they are still my teammates. As a broken bar, I will not become worse than trash." Taken aback at Naruto's statement, Kakashi smiled with pride at his student and simply nodded. As Naruto prepared to leap into the trees surrounding the house, his acute hearing picked up Asuma's words, "He's a good kid, Kakashi." "Yes, he is." And then, in a tone filled with amusement, Asuma inquired, "Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto didn't bother with trying to muffle his laughter at Kakashi's drawled reply. "You say something, Asuma?" Sasuke gazed intently at the rowdy men who had just left the bar. He had identified them as possible employees of Gato and had been tailing them for the past few hours as they moved from bar to bar, occasionally stopping to harass a passing villager. He hoped that they would finally be returning to whatever stronghold Gato had set up. He stalked them stealthily as they moved towards a huge building, from which he could hear the sounds numerous men talking. He jumped to a tree closer to the building and looked into one of the higher windows there. He spied a gathering of about 60 men bandits, judging by their weapons and dressing. He looked around, casting out his senses as well, but he couldn't detect any shinobas among them. Taking another moment to memorize all that he could about the gathered army, he left to return to Tizuna's house for dinner. As he was jumping to another rooftop on the way, he noticed a flicker of gold in the corner of his vision. Stopping on the next rooftop, he turned to see that it was his teammate's gold chair that drew his attention. Looking closer, he noticed that Naruto was surrounded by a group of kids, ranging from about 4 to 10 years old. He seemed to be playing with them. Bewildered, he took some time to confirm that his initial suspicion was indeed correct. Now he was incredulous, assuming that his teammate had wasted time with the children instead of completing his mission. He turned back to look at the scene, only to lock gazes with the searing blue eyes of his fellow team member. He was startled for an instant, before he scowled and turned away. Still, he noticed how the kids were obviously reluctant to let Naruto leave, before he created a clone to the amazement of the children. Leaving the clone to stay with the kids, Naruto jumped to the building Sasuke was on, and with a glance at him, took off towards Tizuna's house. Tsunami had used the fish Naruto caught, as well as the few things she was able to buy from some merchants, to prepare the evening meal. During the meal, she and Tizuna spoke about their day, making sure to express gratitude towards the ninjas that were protecting them. Ino and Sakura then began to talk to Tsunami about girl stuff, while Tizuna engaged Asuma in a discussion. During the course of the meal, Naruto had been aware of Inari's steadily worsening mood. So when the little boy slapped his hand on the table, Naruto was not among those who flinched at the sudden noise. "Why do you bother? What makes you think that you can stand up to Gato? What's the point in trying when you're all going to die anyway?" Inari ran his gaze along those seated at the table, pleased to notice that he had grabbed their attention, until he noticed the repeated sound of chopsticks clinking against ceramic. Turning to Naruto, who was still eating, he snarled out, "And you a broken bar, you piss me off the most. Didn't you hear what I just said? You're all going to die, so why do you bother trying? There are no such things as heroes, so just give up before you die." Silence reigned in the room until Naruto finished his meal. Murmuring his thanks to Tsunami, he turned his gaze on Inari. After giving him a thoughtful look, he said, "You must really hate your grandfather a broken bar and your mother too." Visibly taken aback at that statement, Inari gained a look of confusion on his face, but before he could respond, Naruto continued, "You say that we are all going to die and so we shouldn't bother trying. Yet, we are assigned to protect your family, your grandfather and your lovely mother. That means that, by your argument, we should stop protecting them and let Gato do what he wants with them. Therefore, you must hate them." Inari's mouth opened and closed at Naruto's words, unable to think of anything to say, while the others watched on. Standing up, Naruto began to clear away his used plates, and while doing so, he continued to speak. "You say that heroes did not exist. I say otherwise, but you are entitled to your opinions. I will say this though, all it takes for a hero to be made is for someone to stand up when others would sit down. It's for one person to raise their head when others would keep their heads down. It's for someone to speak out when others would remain silent. It's for someone to say enough, when others would just troll over and take it. At the end of the day, evil can only exist when good people do nothing." On that final note, Naruto left to place his dishes in the sink, leaving the room in silence with Inari slumped and considering the words Naruto just spoke. The 8 ninjas from Konoha were gathered around the table in the dining room, all leaning over a map of Wave Village, as they each gave their assessments of the situation. The Students of Team 10 reported that nothing was amiss during the time they spent with Tizuna at the bridge, except for some of the man's workers deciding to quit out of fear of Gitu. Sakura spoke about the poor living conditions she witnessed when she followed Tsunami. When it got to Sasuke's turn, he leaned forward and reported about the men he tailed, while marking out their location on the map. He mentioned what he noticed about the state of their weapons and any signs of sword training. He made sure to detail their numbers and anything else he might have heard them talk about. When he was done, he threw a slightly condescending smirk at Naruto, assuming that his teammate had wasted the entire day playing with the children and as such, had nothing to report. Naruto began to speak in an even tone, all the while placing markers on the map to denote the locations of the places he was speaking about. Kita has a total of 250 mercenaries in his employ. Most of them spend a majority of their time in these 3 bars, located here, here, and here. He has 4 buildings set up for their housing at these locations. There are 4 lead bandits, each in charge of 60 men, who seem to have had some samurai training. These 4 bandits also have reasonably good equipment, armor and swords. The bandits patrol the village from time to time, usually harassing the villagers. As for Gitu himself, he is located in the huge building at the center of that little island. He always has 6 bandits with him, and from what I saw, those 6 are the best trained of all the bandits he has. I was also able to locate the hideout of Momoki Zabuza and his ninja accomplice, called Haku. As Naruto had begun speaking, eyebrows had been steadily rising at the detailed and comprehensive report. Sasuke, in particular, was completely flummoxed at how much Naruto had been able to learn during the course of the day. However, when Naruto mentioned the missing nen, eyes widened all around. He continued before anyone could interrupt him. I was able to spy on them enough to know that this Hyuga has some knowledge of healing herbs, and as such, Zabuza should be ready to attack in 2 days at the earliest a broken bar. Tomorrow, if he pushes himself. One final thing, I also learned some information that suggests that Gitu plans to gatecrash the confrontation between us and pick off the survivor. Done, Naruto leaned back and gave the others time to digest his long report. Being a prodigy, Kakashi was the first to process all the information and reach the proper conclusion. Gitu never planned to pay Zabuza in the end. Also, after the fight, the survivor might be tired enough to get taken out by such a large force of bandits. He then cast a serious gaze at the genin gathered around him before meeting Asuma's eyes. Reading the reluctant acceptance in them, he continued, seeing as how Asuma is not yet healed enough for a confrontation so soon, I will be facing Zabuza alone. This means it will fall to all of you to handle the accomplice as well as the mercenaries who might come after. The grim reality of the situation fully dawned on the gathered genin, and most of them found it hard to fathom. The genin of Team 7, having already had their first kills, were not as nervous as the others though. Nodding once he saw that they understood the situation, he dismissed them from the meeting, telling them to get as much rest as they could since they would all be following Tizuna to the bridge the next day. He turned back to Asuma to finish planning for the impending confrontation. During breakfast the next day, everyone was on edge. Sensing the tension in the air, the civilians were quiet all throughout the meal. None of them commented when Kakashi casually suggested that Tsunami and Inari should probably stay in all day with Asuma. After the meal, the genins of Team 7 and Team 10 followed Kakashi out, leaving Asuma to guard Tsunami and Inari. Kakashi instructed the genin of Team 10 to follow Tizuna towards the bridge, while Kakashi would lead his team through the trees, attempting to maintain the element of surprise. When they arrived at the bridge, they all noticed the heavy mist that hung in the air, obscuring everything. Having already gotten Asuma's account on Zabuza's modus operandi, Kakashi knew that today was the awaited confrontation day. He was pleased to notice that Shikamaru had correctly interpreted the situation, and that he had gotten the attention of his teammates. When they got closer to the bridge, they were all able to see the unconscious and, in some cases, dead bodies of most of the bridge workers. With a cry of horror, Tizuna rushed towards the nearest person, asking what had happened. With his last breath, the worker replied, "Ah, broken bar yuka broken bar." A demon. A malicious chuckle cut through the heavy fog, instantly putting the gathered ninja on edge. The silhouette of two people, one tall man and a shorter person, became visible in the mist. Slowly emerging from the dense fog, Zabuza was revealed, with a relatively short masked effeminate ninja beside him. Giving off another hair-raising chuckle, he inquired, "What's this, baby Jinin without their mother hen of a Jounin sensei? Well, this should be over quickly then." In a blur, he was standing next to Chaji, his massive Zanbatsu already on a course to cleave the Jinin in twain. The sound of metal hitting metal cut through the air as a silver-haired figure was suddenly there, blocking the fatal attack. Zabuza's eyes widened in shock, before he choked on his breath, as a blade erupted from his chest. Barely managing to turn his head around, his eyes landed on a mop of golden hair. Even with his sword pierced through the demon of the mist's chest, Naruto's eyes were focused elsewhere. The impaled figure standing near him suddenly turned into water, as the clone was dispelled by the fatal hit. The sound of slow, mocking applause came from somewhere else, as another Zabuza stepped into view, his eyes locked on the Genin that had taken out his clone. By this time, the other Genin were only just catching up with Naruto's actions. The members of Team 10 were extremely shocked at the speed and proficiency their peer displayed. However, Zabuza's voice pulled them out of their contemplation. "Take Kakashi, the copy ninja. I'm looking forward to this fight. Haku, take care of the blonde-haired one." In a flash, Kakashi engaged Zabuza, taking their fight away from the rest. Haku stepped forward to fight Naruto, but he was interrupted by Sasuke. "I'll be your opponent." And before any of the others could respond to that change, he dashed forward to clash with Haku. Naruto merely turned to the rest and told them to get into formation around Izuna. He turned back to face the mist, keeping an eye on the respective fights going on at that time. Kakashi used the kunai in his right to deflect the swing of the Zanbatsu, and then he followed up with a blurring jab towards Zabuza's torso with his left. The kunai held in his hand plunged into his opponent's chest, but he never faltered as he ducked in time to avoid a beheading strike from behind. Placing his hand on the floor, he sprung back with a full kick, which was only just blocked by Zabuza's quick reflexes. He still got pushed back though, allowing the two ninja to pause for a moment. Finally deciding to stop feeling each other out, the two blurred towards each other, significantly faster than before. Sasuke used the pause between their exchanges to take another measure of his opponent. He wasn't too certain if it was a boy or girl he was fighting, but it didn't matter. His opponent was fast, maybe even faster than him, although his hits were stronger. They had been going at it for a few minutes and neither was gaining the upper hand. He focused on his opponent Haku in time to hear a voice, "Please surrender. I do not wish to harm you." Scoffing at that statement, Sasuke dashed back in with a roundhouse kick aimed at Haku's head. Having learned by now, Haku elected to dodge instead of block. Leaning back out of the way, he returned with a series of lightning-fast jabs which Sasuke only just managed to block. Suddenly pulling a Senbon out of the air, Haku lurched forward to disable Sasuke, only to have a kunai interrupt the path of his needle. Knowing that he stood no chance of overpowering the other ninja, Haku finally decided to use jutsu. Speaking to Sasuke, he said, "You should have given up when you had the chance. Now, you have already lost." Sasuke's eyes widened as he noticed his opponent weaving one-handle seals. Suddenly Haku stomped his foot and said, "Hayaton, Sensitsuzu, Ice Release, Death by 1,000 Flying Water Needles." His gaze was drawn downwards as he noticed the movement of the puddle of water next to them. Suddenly, the water sprang up into the air and froze into lethal ice needles before his disbelieving eyes. Knowing what would come next, Sasuke's eyes frantically searched for an escape route. Wanting to smack himself for being dumb, he channeled chakra to his legs and blurred out of the way in time to escape being made into a pincushion. Haku glanced left and right, looking for his elusive prey, before a shadow had him looking up, only to receive a powerful kick to the face. Sasuke smirked as he watched Haku painfully get back to his feet. His smirk left his face at Haku's next words, "I do not want to go this far, but for Zabuza-sama I will kill my heart, and kill you." Hayaton, Maki Uhyalzu, Ice Release, Demonic Ice Crystal Mirrors. Sasuke watched with rising trepidation as a dome, made up of numerous ice mirrors, rose up around him. Haku stepped into the mirror nearest to him, and suddenly, his image appeared in every single mirror. Every single one of the images held up a couple of Senbon and took aim. Suddenly the air was filled with flashing needles, and before Sasuke knew what had happened, he found himself stabbed in numerous places, needles sticking out everywhere. His eyes widened as his body lurched forward in shocked pain. Haku brought up another hand with Senbon while Sasuke was pulling out whatever Senbon he could get to. He vanished from the mirrors, blitzing through the air at insane speeds, leaving Sasuke with many more Senbon sticking out of his body. Against his will, a scream of intense pain was wrenched from his throat as he fell to his knees, his body incapable of putting up with the strain. Kakashi whipped around at the pain sound coming from where the Chunin were. Before he could go and check up on them, Zabuza was suddenly in his face, swinging at him. Having already revealed his Sharingan, he was able to dodge the swipes and retaliate when he saw an opening. The figure in front of him turned to water at his fatal strike, causing him to whirl in surprise, searching for his foe. A quicksilver flash of intuition had him speeding towards Tizuna, arriving just in time to get the old man out of the way of Zabuza's strike. His maneuver was not without cost, however, and he gained a long gash along his chest for his troubles. Not even flinching at the pain, he lashed out with a powerful kick which connected and propelled Zabuza away from the Chunin. Pausing in his dash to re-engage the new Chunin, he locked gazes with Naruto, and after a moment, he nodded at his student. Naruto threw a glance at the four Chunin behind him as his sensei dashed off once more. He spoke up in his usual calm and unbothered tone, "Stay and keep an eye on the old man. Sakura, prepare to give aid to Sasuke, I'll be returning with him shortly." He then turned back to the mist, and vanished without a trace. Haku prepared to throw a final barrage of Senbon at his opponent. They had been at it for minutes now, and Sasuke had noticed that over time, his eyes were getting more attuned to Haku's dazzling speeds. Finally noticing that he could almost follow his enemy's movements, he realized that he must have awakened his bloodline limit at the Sharingan. A quick glance into one of the mirrors revealed that his deductions were spot on. It was pointless, however, as, after attempting to use a grand fireball to melt a mirror, and failing, he was too low on chakra to do anything with his Sharingan except watch his death approach. He looked on as Haku prepared what would be the last of the Senbon barrages. Knowing that he couldn't do anything to prevent it, he waited to die. As Haku vanished from his mirror, zipping across the air at tremendous speeds, uncountable Senbon cut through the air, all aimed at vital spots on Sasuke's body. They never hit. There was suddenly a blur of red, silver and gold continually surrounding Sasuke, followed by a sound like tinkling bells as every single Senbon was deflected by a metal blade. Moving so fast that there was practically a circle of unyielding metal around him. Both Sasuke and Haku gaped in disbelieving shock as Naruto slowed down from his high-speed movement around Sasuke, having just knocked all the airborne Senbon out of the air with his ninjato. Sasuke was in a state of shock. His Sharingan had been active when his teammate came to his aid, and still, all he was able to perceive was an indistinguishable blur. Impossible, his mind shouted, no one can be that fast. Haku shook off his shock and observed the newcomer. Before he could say anything to him, Naruto spoke, "I heard you when you said that you wanted to avoid the bloodshed. So, I will give you the chance to surrender now, before I am forced to take you down." Looking at the new arrival, Haku was filled with the certainty that he was no match for the blonde-haired ninja before him. Brushing off whatever reservations he had, he prepared to pepper the two ninjas with more Senbon. Seeing Haku preparing his assault, Naruto sighed out sadly. Before Haku could begin to move, Naruto spun and faced the exact mirror which contained the real body of Haku. Haku's eyes had not finished widening in surprise before Naruto intoned, Raton, Gion, lightning release, false darkness. A bright white spear of crackling lighting flashed out of Naruto's mouth, covering the distance to the ice mirror in an instant. Haku was unable to dodge it in time and so braced himself for impact as the spear reached the mirror, not expecting what happened next. The spear of lightning tore through the mirror like Haku's Senbon's cut through the air moments before, causing Haku to let loose a gasp of pain as the bolt propelled him away, shocking him terribly. Sasuke's wide eyes traveled from the newly made hole in the dome, to his teammate. He suddenly felt a powerful surge of glee as he realized that he had had his Sharingan trained on Naruto when his teammate was performing the technique. His feeling of triumph was ruthlessly squashed in the next instant when he remembered that his teammate never used hand seals. The gleam of amusement in Naruto's blue eyes told Sasuke that he knew what he was thinking. Gritting his teeth, he turned away from his teammate in annoyance, only to be startled as he felt a hand on his shoulder, before the world blurred around him. He noticed that he was suddenly standing a few yards away from the other Genin, just in time for his legs to finally fail him. Sakura and Ino caught him before he fell and began to fuss over his injuries, while arguing with each other on who should get to treat him. Seeing that they had everything in hand, Naruto turned to return to the lying figure of Haku. Approaching the slightly smoking body on the bridge, Naruto noticed that Haku was lying face down. As soon as he was a few steps away, Haku's body shifted, thrusting a Senbon towards his eye. A few scant inches from impact, Naruto moved. Haku's thrust pierced through the head of the afterimage left behind by Naruto, even as his body was already curling from the impact of the elbow planted in his gut. He was suspended in that position for the length of a breath, before momentum kicked in and he was propelled viciously further into the mist. Walking forward, Naruto sensed that Gato had finally arrived. Deciding to wrap things up, he clapped his hands then threw them forward, while intoning, Photon, Ripazu, Wind Release, Gale Palm. A surge of chakra lace wind tore through the mist, easily dispelling it and revealing the entirety of the bridge for all to see. Zabuza was standing on the bridge, bleeding from various wounds on his body, and his eyes widened as soon as he noticed the defeated body of his accomplice lying close to him. Kakashi was perched on top of one of the high-rise beams directly above Zabuza, also with injuries of his own. Both their heads whipped to Naruto as he continued to walk forward. Casually raising an arm, Naruto pointed to the other end of the bridge. Slowly, they both turned to see Gato standing at the head of a huge bandit army. By this time, Haku had painstakingly gotten to his feet and limped to Zabuza's side. Zabuza's quick mind correctly deduced the reason for Gato's presence. Gritting his teeth, he spat out, "Gato, just what in the hell do you think you are doing?" Giving an oily smile to his employee, Gato responded, "Why, taking out an insurance policy of course. Missing in are quite expensive my friend, I'm sure you understand." Realizing that neither he nor Haku was in a good enough shape to take on all the bandits without risk, he turned to Kakashi. "It seemed like our business here is done." Take. Giving a nod to him, Kakashi jumped down to his blonde-haired student's position, sparing a moment to glance at the other Genin gathered around Tazuna, reassuring himself that they were fine. He turned back to face the situation at hand, cursing himself for getting carried away and using up as much energy as he had. He snapped out of his internal musings as he noticed Naruto stepping forward towards Zabuza and the fake Hunternin. Zabuza and Haku tensed slightly as Naruto approached them. They didn't drop their guards even as he stepped past them, closer to Gato and the bandits. Turning his suddenly frigid gaze on the people in front of him, he spoke in a tone that effortlessly cut through the air, causing shivers of discomfort due to how lethal he sounded. "Just to be able to say I tried, I will give each of you the chance to leave here unharmed, as long as you never disturb this village again." Even Zabuza and Haku gaped at the Genin for a moment, before the raucous laughter of the bandits drew their attention again. Naruto simply took another step forward, and partially slid his sword out of its sheath, preparing to draw it. Snorting at the child in front of him, the lead bandit stepped forward and shouted out, "Come on boys, let's kill these pieces of trash and the old man. Then we can have our way with the rest of the villagers." The resulting roar of approval from the other bandits was so loud, it almost shook the bridge, also masking the sound of Naruto's blade returning to its sheath. The other genin paled slightly at the prospect of having to kill the bandits before them. The sound from the bandits was abruptly cut off as the air stilled and a crackling sound cut through the air. Everyone focused on Naruto to find his right arm held above his head, with his hand curled as though he were holding a javelin. In the cusp of his hand, yellow lightning crackled merrily away. With a steadily increasing hum in the air, Naruto's emotionless voice cut through the air like a herald for death. Raiton, Raryu Uno Hounjuki, lightning release, lightning. Dragon's Heavenward Halberd. A glowing yellow halberd of supercharged death flashed into existence in Naruto's curled hand, which he then promptly threw forward. The attack sped through the air, reaching the front line of the gathered bandits before anyone could react. By that time, the bladed part of the halberd had widened to equal the width of the bridge, ensuring that it got everyone in its path. It sliced through the bandit horde, flash-frying internal organs, evaporating the blood in their veins, and destroying their brains. Moments before it got to Gitu, who had long since retreated to the back of the group, it abruptly narrowed to the width of a man's torso. It pierced through Gitu's chest and carried the screaming man out over the water, where it promptly detonated. Once the resulting lazo ended, only the ash drifting down to the sea was left as proof that Gitu ever existed. Naruto turned around to find Zabuza and Hoka gaping at him with widened eyes. Looking past them, he met the proud eye of his teacher, and then the shocked and slightly frightened faces of his fellow genin. As he was walking back to the others on the bridge, a clone of his landed beside him, threw him a scroll, and then dispelled itself in a brief flash of lightning. He ignored the curious gazes of his teammates and turned to face Zabuza and Hoka, who tensed under his cool gaze. He unrolled the scroll partway and swiped his finger along it. With a small puff of smoke, a bag was suddenly in his hand. He tossed it at Zabuza, who reflexively caught it. Looking inside, his eyes widened again as he noticed the large amount of money in it. Casting a questioning gaze at Naruto, he received a simple nod in response. Surprising Kakashi and the others watching them, he inclined his head towards Naruto, then turned with Haku and vanished from sight. Naruto returned to Kakashi's side in time to catch him as his chakra exhaustion finally caught up to him. He noticed that his sensei couldn't even summon up the energy to cover his transplanted eye, so he did it for him, to the visible relief of his teacher. Together, they made their way back to the rest of their team and the old man,